United States is no longer a systemically racist country. We have
so we're going to have to disagree there, but
we're not systemically racist in the sense that the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, the media, corporations, the academy has been trying very hard to overcome our history of racism. We can disagree about where we are, and I'm not sure we would disagree because I think we have a lot to go. But I think to call it systemically racist is to confuse what it was when I was growing up. Let me tell you when I was growing up, what it was a little bit like. Just give you 30 seconds.
Sure.
I think I told you. I was first in my class in law school. I was editor-in-chief of the Yale Law Journal. I couldn't even get an interview with a Wall Street firm because my name was Dershowitz and I was Jewish. There was systemic anti-Semitism. There was systemic sexism. There was systemic homophobia. There was systemic racism, most of all. It was completely systemic. It was from the top down. It involved every institution of government, every institution of the media, the academy, every institution that was important was systemically racist. I don't think you can say that about America today. We are trying hard. We have a lot to go, but we should recognize. I wrote this article on when the new national holiday, Juneteenth, was described, and saying, it's hard to call a nation systemically racist when it recognizes the anniversary of the end of slavery. Not alone, but I think that we have to recognize where we've come from in order to make sure we know where we have to get to.
Right. Well, I would say I would agree with you that much has changed. Like I told you, actually, before we went on air, my family, my parent, well, at least my father, grew up in Germany. And the reason he did, my grandfather went to Brooklyn College too, as well, another Brooklyn guy. And the reason he did was because in his field, he could not get a job in the United States. So he moved to post-World War II Germany as a Black person because it was better for him and for his career than he could do in the United States because of Jim Crow. And I'm from the Baltimore area, and my grandfather used to hate Baltimore because he said the only place a Black person could get a sit-down meal was in the train station. So and when you mentioned lynching, 3 of my ancestors were lynched, after the Civil War. So, I definitely think that we are in a different place today than we were then. I think if we didn't acknowledge that, then we wouldn't be acknowledging the work of so many African Americans who work to make our country better. However, the reason I will say that systemic racism still exists is because if you look, for example, even the argument that I thought was really interesting, the right got really upset because I think it was Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg brought up the fact that the structures, systemic racism means that it's built into our structures. You don't need personal animus in order to fuel it. So he brought up the fact that there are structures that were built in New York by Robert Moses. You being a New York guy, you're familiar with this. So there were structures that were built in order to keep Black people and Puerto Ricans from getting to the beach. So they built the bridges lower so that public buses couldn't get through.
It was amazing.
That's a fact.
I agree with that. I agree with that. It was very, look, I'll never forgive Robert Moses because he basically took the Brooklyn Dodgers out of Brooklyn. That was the worst day of my life. I went to high school 4 blocks away from Ebbets Field, and I met Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese and Gil Hodges and Carl Erskine, who's turning 95 this week. And I remember the 1955 Brooklyn Dodgers, but Robert Moses took them out of Brooklyn because he wouldn't allow a stadium, a good stadium to be built, because he felt that the demographics were such that it would encourage more minority people to come to games. And if he moved it to Los Angeles, it would be, racism was pervasive and accepted as late as the 50s. I was a Supreme Court law clerk in 1964. And we were hoping to dismantle it all then. That was the goal, to dismantle it. but it, obviously didn't work completely, but it worked at least in part with voting rights acts, which are being set back now, and other changes. So look, it's a work in progress, but it's a work.